Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Miss Sam. I am one of the librarians here in the teen department at Levittown Public Library, and we are honored today to have Dominic Calgi with us, who is a construction management, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about his career, how he got there, and so we're so thankful to have you. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Dominic. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you, Samantha. Nice meeting you. Yes. Well, we are a construction management firm, and the company has been in business over 100 years. My grandfather started the company in 1919, and for the majority of those years, we were builders, general contractors. And for the last 15 to 20 years, we've moved into more of the construction management phase of the industry, where we oversee contractors performing the work and really act as the representative of the owner. We operate throughout the tri-state area, and the majority of our business is in educational facilities such as school districts, libraries, municipalities, village halls, fire stations, police facilities, and healthcare facilities.
Great. And what brought you to this career? What obviously I know you said that your grandfather was in the business. You've been your family has owned the business for over 100 years. What personally about you, wanted to continue that legacy?
Well, it's interesting because I had after my grandfather, my father and my uncles were involved, and I obviously had a few cousins also working during our summer vacations and when we were off working on the job sites, and they all chose to go into nicer professions. I decided to stay with construction because I enjoy it. I love building things. I like seeing accomplishments at the end of the day, and just the camaraderie of the teamwork with the architects, engineers, the tradespeople. It's a great environment.
That's great. And then what was kind of your educational path? Did you have to go to college? Is there a certain type of degree that you need? And if you're interested in this career, are there, trade schools that could lead to this? What are some of the different educational paths, one that you took and one that, maybe others might be interested in?
Well, I'll tell you which, how I took it, and then we'll go from there. Early on, as I said, I knew I wanted to go into this business. And at the time, it was primarily either construction engineering or civil engineering in college. And I chose construction engineering, which was a little different than civil in that it wasn't stressed as much on design rather than the actual building end of it. We had to take, design courses and know about structures, but our primary focus was the managing and running of construction companies. So that was through my college. After that, I spent about 2.5 years with Stone and Webster Engineering out of Boston. And their primary focus was construction of nuclear power plants. And I was on a couple of projects with them. And then I moved to Chicago and was employed by a general contractor who performed much the same work my family did, but on a much larger scale. So there had experience in road construction, airport construction, dams. So that was a good background. I was there for about close to 6 years. And then I finally decided that it was time to come back to the family business. And through my father passing away and an uncle passing away, it really was down to me as the only possibility of continuing the firm. And I still had 2 uncles in the business for a few years, and then they retired. So it was a continuation. But I remember when I was growing up, my father had said, if you want to come back to the family business at any time, you really need to go out and work for other people and find out what they know. And then you can bring back and offer something to the table. So that's how I progressed to where I am. So for the most part, things have developed a little bit more with college education as far as construction. Now you have majors in construction management, and which really focuses on the business end side of it. And although you still may have some construction courses, the more focus is on the management end. So there's three routes in college: either civil engineering, construction engineering, or construction management. And that's primarily if you want to go into the management end of the business. For those that like doing the trades, there are local like BOCES type schools, and who develop masons, carpenters, all the important trades that are needed to construct these buildings. And a lot of companies have apprenticeship programs as well with their trades. So there are two forms, plus the union have their own apprenticeship programs. So there are a number of ways of getting into this business. I've had project managers who started out with me as laborers and carpenters, but they showed a great interest and zeal for expanding and moving their career forward, and so they developed from that angle. So there's a few roads to get to running a construction company.
Gotcha. So that actually leads into one of my other questions, was about advancement opportunities. So like you said, it is possible for someone to start out more in the trade professions and then kind of work their way up.
Correct. And even for those who pursue the management going to college, it's good if they can get summer internships with construction companies, where we've had a couple over the years that have come in and helped us with quantity takeoff, part-time in the office, part-time in the field, because to really be good at managing the trades, you have to have a good feel for what it takes to actually do that work. So whatever skills they can acquire or experience in actually being in the field and getting their hands dirty all pays off in the end.
Yeah, definitely. So it's actually good that you mentioned that, because I talk about internships all the time, and I highly, recommend any team that, to experience whatever they're interested in internships, getting those experiences to see if it is something that they actually, would like to pursue. So I guess my question then begins is, how would they go about looking for internships? Is there, any particular resources that they should be aware of? Should they just be going to construction companies and asking? What's the best route for that?
Well, typically, at least in the college level, there are work study programs, and the colleges and the particular departments like the engineering department, construction department may have affiliations with local contractors that are part of the work study program. And in our case, we had our internships came from people that they knew who knew us and said, gee, it would be good if you can get an internship with them, because they were in the construction management curriculum at their schools, and it worked out well. So there are a few ways. At last resort, you can go to your directory of construction companies. Engineering News Record has their yearly list of the top 500 construction companies in the nation. And that's usually a good source to find those companies that are in your geographical area that you may want to send a application or at least an interest letter. For companies like us who do that, it's great, because we're having young people come in. They're still in college, they're still learning, and whatever experience we can give them usually comes back to us when they graduate. We like to take them on as full-time, employees. And it's also good experience for the construction companies, because they come in with a lot of current computer knowledge that a lot of us that are up there in years lack. So it's very helpful.
Gotcha. So that actually leads wonderfully into my next question was, talking a little bit about work conditions and your day to day. How would you say that technology has changed within your field? Obviously, with a company that's been around for 100 years, obviously there's been a lot of change in technology. Is there anything that you see on the horizon that you think might be coming as far as new technologies? How would you
Well,
say about
there
that?
has been a big change over the years in the information technology portion of the project. Um, I remember in the early 80s when fax machines were very popular, you would get fax questions, and whereas before you would receive an inquiry from a subcontractor or an architect, and you had time to think about it before you gave the answer. Fax machine cut that time down, and now with emails, people expect instantaneous responses, and so that is a good and bad situation, because you really want to think some of these issues out before you respond. But that has been helpful, though, in speeding the overall process. Depending upon what's taking place on the job site, if there's an issue, you could take a picture, you can forward it to the engineer, the architect, let them know how critical it is, and you will get a decision rather quickly. And that helps the overall construction process. We have two systems that we use. We have a system, Primavera SureTrack, which does all our project scheduling. And that is extremely helpful. Years ago, you used to have to draw by hand these critical path schedules that were about the size of a dining room table. And they were very detailed, and they gave you information as far as different tasks and how many days and what your flow time was. And it was great for the construction owners, it was great for the architects, and it was great for the owners. But the people in the field who had to abide by this had no understanding of it whatsoever. So that's progressed. In SureTrack, it's more of a linear type expression of the schedule, and it shows the interrelationships about what tasks have to proceed. And that's helpful because the typical project foreman or superintendent, they can easily understand that and translate it to their crews on what has to be completed. The other advantage over the years is project management systems. There are many out there. We happen to choose one that's called Procore, and that we utilize for all our shop drawings, all our RFIs, requests for information, payment requests, correspondence. Everything is detailed on that. The contractors on the job are brought into that system. They have their own access. And it's helpful because not only the contractors and the architect and engineers, but the owners also have access. So they could see 24/7 what's happening on their job site, what's taking place. So that's been helpful because, there's always, years ago, there was always a gray area on owners knowing what's actually going on their project. So this is right there for everybody to see. So that's been helpful. As far as future, I think there's going to be more automation, but that's done at the material end and the fabrication end. That will be delivered to the job site. As far as the job site itself, of course, there's been major advancements in the construction equipment as far as what's being used. But the actual methods of constructing, the labor end really hasn't changed much over the past 100 years or so. It still takes skilled people, skilled craftsmen to put everything together.
Gotcha. And then that actually is a good point too that I was going to ask about is, whether I would assume that with such a large management plan and a project from start to finish, a lot of jobs within that plan are rely on the one that came before them. So I would assume that there's a lot of teamwork that goes into, a particular project. Would you say that you do more work as in teams? Do you do more work individually? How would that work?
Construction is a team effort, and and the team, the initial planning team is, of course, the owner who has the the vision that he wants to or she wants to build something or renovate something. And then it goes to the architects and engineers for the design. And then, of course, to the construction companies to estimate and then build the project. So it's all a team effort. And going back to one of your earlier questions, what interested me as a teenager growing up was being on the job sites and talking with all the crews and, having your coffee breaks and having your lunches and hearing their stories about jobs. And just that camaraderie is what I really love, because you've got a lot of skilled people. It's a challenging process, whether it's a large project or a small project. Construction is not building a watch. Every day there are challenges. Every day there are problems. There are issues. And the more you talk with other people, the more interrelationships that you have, the easier it is to solve some of these problems that come up. So teamwork is the number one factor in construction.
Gotcha. So some other things as far as typical work conditions would be kind of, how are your hours typically throughout a day? Do you find that throughout the week your hours stay the same? Do they fluctuate very rapidly? I'm sure with different projects, I'm sure there's some differentiation there. So how would you say that is?
Well, all projects have deadlines, so that's number one, and you're constantly trying to meet that deadline. And there are issues that come up along the way. For example, this past year, the whole COVID issue stopped a lot of fabrication, holding up shipments. Labor was also a problem, and some projects just were shut down entirely because they weren't deemed important enough to continue. But the day-to-day, you put in a lot of hours. There's no denying it. If you think you just want a 40-hour work week, 8 to 4, whatever, and you want to go home and leave your work behind you, then construction wouldn't be for you, to say the least. It's with you all the time. And whether you're the owner of the company or a project manager or a project superintendent or the carpenter foreman, you're always planning for the next day, because you've got people that depend on you for direction. And as the saying goes, time is money. Mm-hmm. And the last thing you want are crews sitting around idle waiting for you to make a decision. So construction is a very long, you have to put in your long hours. I remember, again, growing up, we always heard the term that if the project superintendent wasn't taking the roll of plans home with them at nighttime, he wasn't a good project superintendent.
Gotcha. So. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah. And then could you take us through kind of your typical day? What things are you doing most of the time? I know obviously it varies, depending on the projects, but are there any things that are consistent within your day? Are there a lot of things that, fluctuate? How would that be?
Yeah, and no day, and that's what I like. No day is typical. Every day presents a new challenge. Just from the minor thing of having an impromptu meeting, especially now that we have Zoom, that you're not planning for, and they say, "Oh, can you meet at 2:00?" And it's a client, and you say, "Of course you can." So that's pretty much what's been happening over this past year. But typically, my day is checking in with my project managers in the morning to go over what they have planned, if anything happened the day before, working with my project estimators and schedulers, because you're always working on another proposal. So for me, it's kind of a oversight of everybody that's working. And then there are certain proposals that I just work on primarily. And then it's just the general oversee of managing the company. But for the project manager on the site, his day is a straight 8 to 10 hours, and he's constantly answering questions. He's constantly reviewing the plans and the specifications, because the other contractors will come to him for guidance, and he has to know, or she has to know, those plans and specifications backwards and forwards. Construction, as I said, is a team effort, but it's like anything else. You have people who base their proposals on a certain perception of what the job is. And at times you have to bring them back into reality. So you have to really know your plans and specs, which is a lot of study and a lot of pre-planning. So their days are, project manager, I think, has probably the most difficult day because you have no rest period. One person, contractor, walks out of the trailer, another one walks in with a question. So you're bombarded. The next would be the project estimator. He's got deadlines. He has quantity takeoff. He has to be up to speed on his production rates and his crew rates, because without him being accurate and as economical as possible, then you're not getting the work, and you have to feed that furnace. So you always have to make sure you have a lot of work on hand and a good backlog and opportunities down the road. So pretty much everyone, you have long days. You have long days.
Yeah, that's acceptable. Yeah. And then would you say too that there are certain times of the year that are busier than others? Is it pretty much a steady workflow throughout the year?
It's pretty much steady. I mean, there are ups and downs, and of course, summer work, especially with school construction, that's always during the summer. And you can't start the projects until school is out, and they usually want the majority of the work done by that Labor Day. So that's very intensive, and we're all picking contractors from the same pool. They're picking their trades from the same pool, and even the suppliers, they are under the gun because they may be providing multiple jobs with steel or building materials. So the summer is hectic, but throughout the year, you have your alteration, your renovation projects. You have new construction that will be a little bit more difficult with winter conditions. But it's really, unless the economy drops, construction is typically pretty busy all year round. Construction has always been the bellwether of the economy. When there's any kind of a depression or recession, usually the construction industry is the first to feel it and about the last to get out of it. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And then my other question is, can you offer any advice for anything that a teen could be doing now if they're interested in that field in construction or even construction management, anything that they could be doing now while they're in high school to either work on some of those skills or even just to get some experiences? What could they be doing now?
Well, as I said, a lot of times for teenagers, it would be good if they can get involved with a local construction company. Even if it's sweeping floors, you see what's going on, you hear what's going on, and eventually you will be doing other things. So that, and coupled with as far as their studies, it's highly math oriented. But you have to also have good reading comprehension skills, because you're constantly reading and interpreting specifications and plans. So if they can try working, even if it's something a little related, even if it's working with a lumber company or supply, just to start getting to know what it's about, the terms that are used, and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, because that's how you really learn.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I forgot to ask too about in your typical workday was about licensing. Is there any specific licenses that you need in order to be, I guess it depends kind of on what part of the, what field you're in within the construction company, but I guess on the management side, are there any particular licenses that you need in order to be in the management area?
No, not necessarily. You find a lot of people that are in the management end have an architectural degree, or they have an engineering degree. In those professions, obviously, the architects that are AIAs are the licensed professional architects, and the engineers have their professional engineering license by the state. For the management end, there is no licensing by the state of New York. There are some that do require licenses. I believe California is one state. There are a few others that do require contractors to be licensed. But for the most part, that's it. Now you get to the trades, of course, plumbers have to be licensed, electricians have to be licensed. But for the management end, is a Construction Management Association of America, which has their own licensing. It's not a requirement, but it's something if you want to achieve as a company, you can do that. But it's not a requirement. Typically, the electricians and plumbers need it because what they're doing is considered life safety issues. The engineers and architects, because they're designing it, so they need to be licensed. The management end, you're either building it or coordinating the building of it. So as long as you employ people that have the licenses, then
that works, right?
Yeah.
Then that kind of covers it. And then what would you say is the best part of your job, and what would you say can be the most challenging?
The best part is completing the project, because then everything is, you reached your goal, and hopefully the project has come in on time and on budget. And typically every project, they are completed on time, they are completed on budget, but not necessarily the original time or the original budget, because construction is constantly changing. So to have a project completed and a satisfied owner is one of the best parts of the project, because it's like whenever anyone does a good job, you want not only do you want recognition, you want who you're doing it for to feel good about it. The worst part, actually, the worst part is when you've worked very hard on a proposal and then find out you weren't successful. Then, you go into a depressed moment for about 15 minutes until another set of plans are on your desk, and then you get all excited again. So
yeah, it's kind of like rejection type of
exactly.
feeling to it. Yeah.
You have to cope with a little rejection. Yes.
That's fair. And I guess my very last question for today is, any words of advice or any, words of wisdom that you would have to leave us with for the teens in our community?
Just, whether you want construction or anything that you choose, be focused, go after it. Don't wait for it to happen to you. You want construction, if you want architecture, if you want to be a high school teacher, be focused, go after it. If that's really what you want to do, don't hold back.
Great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time today. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.